Because none of that foundation is laid with original sin, blood atonement, any of that.
Yeah, exactly. So in the very beginning, the problem was started with Adam. And of course, as a result, we have a problem with Jesus eventually.
Awesome.
So that's how it is.
Michael, you have that same question. So what would you say are the main differences between Islam and Christianity?
Do you ever wonder why they say Judeo-Christian values and not Judeo-Christian Islamic values? It's because they don't have the same values as you and me, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
Their value system is going to be based more on honor, order, authority, structure. Christianity, it's based on love, charity. Those are the primary values versus the primary values in Islam. They're different. So when you deal with that, I see a lot of Christians that go out and they're like, I just got to present the gospel. That's great. But you got to break down those walls. You got to understand you're not going up to somebody who's going to share similar values from their religious worldview. So you got to break down the religion first. You got to show problems in the Quran. You got to show problems in the Hadith. You start breaking down their foundation, then you can present the gospel. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a call-in stream and a Muslim came on. We spent a good 30, 40 minutes breaking down, showing problems in the Quran. Hey, your Quran confirms our scriptures, but then it contradicts our scriptures, like as he was showing here. Okay? Once we broke that down, we then said, the good news is that God does love you. It's not like in Islam where you're just a slave. You're a son in Christianity. He broke down in tears. That wouldn't have happened if we did not break down his foundation first and then present him the gospel. So present the gospel to Muslims, but you got to prepare yourself, equip yourself with the right weapons so you can tear down those boundaries. And then once you do, you help them break that down. Then you present them the gospel, and you will start planting seeds, I guarantee it.
It's a phenomenal game plan. So Pastor Greg, what would you say are the main differences between Islam and Christianity?
Yeah, actually, really everything. Pretty much everything is different. What we focus on with our team and our approach is we focus on Old Testament differences, because actually what we've seen is all throughout the stories, the Quran is actually filled with a lot of stories of biblical figures, and it has way more about the Old Testament. So we actually start with looking at all the distortions at the foundations. And I think that's really what we're seeing is the real obstacle for them to understand the New Testament things, is because actually all the Old Testament stuff has been distorted. So I actually want to show you some of the crazy differences, just briefly. Okay, so let's see if you can catch the mistakes before I mention them. So let's all open our Qurans.
If you look under your seat, you'll have a Quran. I'm totally kidding. One day, though.
Nobody looked. All right, so this is... I'm going to read this one. It's okay. All right, yeah. So in Surah 2, this is about King Saul. So it says, when King Saul marched forth with his army, he cautioned, God will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his fill from it is not with me, and whoever does not taste it, except a sip from the hollow of his hands, is definitely with me. They all drank their fill except for a few. When he and the remaining faithful with him crossed the river, they said, now we're no match for Goliath and his warriors. When they advanced to face Goliath and his warriors, they prayed. And so they defeated them by God's will, and David killed Goliath. Did anybody catch it? Gideon, okay? Exactly.
And this is fascinating. So this is what Muslims believe is their divine, unaltered scripture, that this is the correct stories of everything that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob actually intended.
Yeah, and so also I want you to keep in mind, what are they always going to say once we present differences, or we're going to contrast the Bible and the Quran? They're going to say, your Bible is?
Corrupted.
Absolutely. I like that. Yeah, and so what our approach is to do is actually challenge them on the specifics, rather than talk about the generalities of corruption, whether it was corrupted or not, in fact, yes or no. We're actually going to focus on what specific things they're going to have to claim were changed. And all of those specific things there's so many in the story. I mean, imagine this was the original story that was in the Old Testament. They're claiming that this was changed from this, which should be the original, to what we have in 1 Samuel and Judges. What, they took the scene about Saul going down the river and they put it into Judges 7 for Gideon? I mean, why? And exactly, there is no answer to that. So we overwhelm them with the differences in the details, in the specifics, and what we really emphasize is that this is a respectful approach. Because we're not, well, yes, we can agree with IP about like morality issues existing. We try to circumvent all of the emotional side of going back and forth on that, and we go to factual differences in the details, starting with the Old Testament. I actually want to share another if I can.
Go ahead. If you can add the next question too.
And I hope that Pastor Lucas will hear this, because actually I heard that he's written.
There he is back there. Everybody wave at Pastor Lucas back here.
Okay, I've heard that he's written and taught on Job quite a bit. So I'm going to tell you, I hope that your book aligns with this, right? Okay, let's see. This is crazy, guys, okay? So, and remember our servant Job, when he cried out to his Lord, Satan has afflicted me with distress and suffering. Did Job know that it was Satan causing his... Oops, right? No, but it doesn't stop there, listen. We responded, stomp your foot. Here is a cool spring for washing and drinking. And we gave him back his family, twice as many, as a mercy from us and a lesson for people of reason. And we said, take in your hand a bundle of grass and strike your wife with it, and do not break your oath. We truly found him patient. What an excellent servant he was. Indeed, he constantly turned to God. You might have to edit some of your stuff, Lucas.
It's not very compatible with the Quran. So let's go over here to Michael Jones again. What do you think of the claim that Islam is an Abrahamic religion?
Yeah, it's not.
There you go.
They claim it is because Muhammad started preaching to pagans. And he was telling them, they were rejecting him. He said, well, when we meet Jews and Christians, they're going to agree with me and they're going to know I'm a prophet. That didn't happen. And Islam adopted a lot of pagan practices. The whole circling the Kaaba, the ancient pagans used to do that. Kissing the black stone, the pagans started to do that. You know, historians like Tom Holland will note, Islam borrowed, it's like a Frankenstein amalgamation of all these things. It takes things from the ancient Roman structure, Arabian paganism. It borrows some sprinkles in from Judaism and Christianity. But it's not like an Abrahamic religion. And the simplest way to show that is like, okay, what is the basis of the Abrahamic faith? The faiths. The Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. We accept those. As you point out, no. They say our books have been corrupted. So then they're rejecting the basis of what it is to be an Abrahamic faith. Therefore, it's something different. It's a Frankenstein. It's an amalgamation of all these things. So it can't be an Abrahamic faith like Christianity or Judaism is. It's different. It's borrowing things. Sikhism borrows from Christianity. We don't say Sikhism is an Abrahamic faith. Why do we say Islam is?
So, Pastor Greg, what do you think of the claim that Islam is an Abrahamic religion?
Yeah, so actually this is at the heart of what we share with Muslims. We address this issue, and the main source for what Muslims believe about Abraham in a most at the fundamentals of what they believe about Abraham and Ishmael, we draw from Sahih al-Bukhari 3364. It's a hadith that tells a story about Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar traveling down from Canaan to Mecca. Now, do you remember in Genesis when Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca? And it tells a story that this is basically the time when they separated from each other, when Hagar and Ishmael separated from Abraham. And Ishmael, it says, was a nursing infant at the time. Now, if you look closely in the context in Genesis 21 and look at 17 as well, Ishmael was actually about 17 years old, not a nursing infant. Okay, it was also after the time that Isaac was born, right? But certainly if Ishmael was only a nursing infant, Isaac could not be born, as Muslims also believe he couldn't be born by that point. So the story is just radically different at the foundations, but you have to understand the rest of the story. So let me just summarize it for you, what's here. So Abraham brings them down from Canaan to Mecca. This is about 838 miles in one direction. And he drops them off there, it says, in a barren valley when there's nobody living there. This is before there's any city in Mecca. It's just a valley in the desert, and there's no water. And he leaves them there, and he goes back home to Canaan. And then they run out of water, and then Hagar, this goes actually to what something Mike was bringing up about pagan rituals. It tells the story of Hagar looking for help. So she puts the baby under a bush. She runs up one side of the valley, up a mountain called Safa, looking for people. Nobody's there. She runs across the other side to a mountain called Marwa. Nobody's there. She runs back and forth 7 times. And this actually is commemorated on the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage all Muslims are supposed to take to Mecca, where they reenact this event that supposedly happened, where Hagar ran back and forth 7 times, and this is called Sa'i. Every Muslim believes this. This is absolutely essential to what they believe. And after this point in the story, there's an Arab tribe called the tribe of Jurhum that spotted a bird circling in the distance, and so they sent scouts over and they stumbled upon Hagar and baby Ishmael at the well called the Zamzam well, which God supposedly had opened by an angel. Then Ishmael is raised in that Arab tribe of Jurhum. They teach him Arabic, the Hadith says, which means they're Arabs. Interestingly, Islam doesn't even claim that Ishmael is the father of all the Arabs. He marries into it, because it says that after the age of puberty, he marries a woman from amongst them, the Jurhum tribe. And later on, years later, Abraham returns, and Abraham and Ishmael build the Kaaba. Now, if we look in the Torah at the parallel story with the separation of Hagar and Ishmael from Abraham, or Ishmael and Hagar from Abraham, we see in Genesis 21, verse 14, on the occasion when Isaac was weaned, Sarah wanted them gone, and God said, do what Sarah says. And then verse 14, it says that Abraham got up early in the morning, packed their bags, and sent them off, and they wandered where? Does anybody know? The desert of Beersheba. Now, is Beersheba anywhere near Mecca? Oh, that's a big difference. So actually, did Abraham even travel with them? Oh no, but Islam says he went 838 miles one way, escorting them down to Mecca and left them there. So according to the Torah, Abraham and Ishmael never traveled to Mecca, and of course they never built the Kaaba, and of course the Sa'i ritual is actually a pagan ritual.
That was incredible. And so this is an issue as well, because in the Quran it says that the Kaaba is the sacred house. Is that correct?
Yeah, which actually is another way. I actually heard a Muslim sheikh explaining it this way, which I found, I like that he said it this way. He said that Muslims should start using more Christian language for the Christians to understand, that actually when it says the house of Allah, the house of God, they should say it's the temple of God. Okay, because the claim is that the Kaaba is the original temple. Before the first temple built by Solomon was the temple built by Abraham and Ishmael in Mecca.
Let's go to Alex. Alex, what do you think of the claim that Islam is an Abrahamic religion?
I second both guys, and I want to add a little bit on the top of that. Greg already mentioned that Hadith said about Ishmael grew up in Mecca among Arabs of Jurhumite tribe, and it said he learned Arabic from them as he grew up, and then he reached the age of puberty. They, Arabs, marry him a woman from amongst them. We have one verse from the Genesis 21:21. He, Ishmael, lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of land of Egypt. Thank you very much. That's one verse debunk entire story of Muhammad. So that tells us that Muhammad just make up the story to boost his credibility.
I need to say something. So actually about that means every time you hear a Christian say that Ishmael's the father of the Arabs, now you know the Torah says otherwise. He's the father of 0 Arabs. He's the son of an Egyptian woman, Hagar, and a Hebrew man, Abraham. So he's 50-50. He marries an Egyptian woman, which means his children are 75% Egyptian, 25% Hebrew, 0% Arab.
And so this very popular claim that Muhammad is an Ishmaelite gets completely debunked just in Genesis 17, 20, and 21.
Yeah, I mean 21:14 and 21:21. you need those verses memorized.
This is phenomenal. So let's go back to Michael Jones over here. Where do you think Islam comes from?
The devil. Next question. Well, as I said earlier, I mean, yeah, I do think, if you put me in a corner, I do think something did appear to Muhammad in the cave. It just was, the funny thing about that story is when Muhammad got his first revelation, something attacked him in a cave and told him to read. You know what he said when he went out of there? He thought he was demon possessed. He's the only eyewitness to what happened, and his first thought was it was a demon that attacked him. And then his wife was like, "No, that was an angel. You weren't there." I'm going with what the eyewitness said, okay? The eyewitness said it was a demon. And then other people, like Wadaka and his wife Khadijah, were like, no, that may be an angel. You're a prophet. Thanks, guys. Thanks for, messing that up. So it probably came from some sort of dark influence. Can't say what, but that's what the eyewitness said. Then you probably have Muhammad. He's convinced he's a prophet, but he starts putting in his own things like, I have a revelation. God said I can have multiple wives and a child bride. That's what we see false prophets do. They feed themselves. Jesus gave everything for us. False prophets get everything from you. Yeah. And that's what happened with Muhammad. So where did this come from? Two places. Satan and the evil of man.
That's a phenomenal answer. Pastor Greg, where do you think Islam comes from?
I don't really disagree with that point, but I think it would just add on to it if we're trying to think also of like human influence. So definitely there should be a spiritual element. I wouldn't deny that. But yes, in terms of human influence, what we see in all the stories in the Quran, actually, not only are they messed up, they're filled mostly with rabbinical Jewish legends. Okay, this is called midrash, and there are legends of different influences, but there's way more stories in the Quran about Old Testament figures, and those stories are just saturated with rabbinical legends called midrash. So actually, something that we look at with Muslims is Rabbi Louis Ginsburg's The Legends of the Jews. So this is the rabbi, early 1900s, who collected all of these legends and put them all in order for us to read. He did all the work for us. And we just cross-reference it, and it's all over the place in the Quran. But not only is the Quran filled with legends, the theology of the Quran, which actually Alex was already getting to about original sin and so on. So remember, he said there's no original sin in the Quran. He said that there's no blood atonement in the Quran, that prophets are virtually sinless. Of course there's no dying Messiah. Also no theophanies, God appearing as a man and coming into his own creation. Guess what? All of these things, the rabbis teach too. No original sin. I don't know if you know that, guys. In their sources, beyond what we call the Old Testament, or they call the Tanakh or the Hebrew Scriptures, they have many other writings. The Talmud is one example, but many others. And they rewrite everything. They basically reinterpret everything, reframe it with their traditions, denying original sin, denying the need for blood atonement, denying, of course, a dying Messiah, denying theophanies, even though they're all throughout the Old Testament. And what surprised me, actually, as I read the Jewish legends, the Midrash, is they also whitewash the sins of the prophets and the patriarchs. They excuse them. They write a backstory to explain them away. And guess what? All those things are in the Quran. So what is it really coming from? The theology is the same.
I mean, this is fascinating. Can you give us an example? Is there a way to give us a fast example?
Oh yeah. This is one of my favorites. I bet Michael knows this one too. This is from the story of Joseph. And I want you to tell me if this sounds familiar, if you remember this story in Genesis. It says, some women of the city gossiped. The chief minister's wife, that's Potiphar's wife, is trying to seduce her slave boy.
Love for him has plagued her heart. Indeed, we see she's clearly mistaken. When she heard about their gossip, she invited them and set a banquet before them. She gave each one a knife, then said to Joseph, "Come out before them." When they saw him, they were stunned by his beauty, so much that they cut their hands and exclaimed, "Good God, this cannot be human. This must be a noble angel." She said, "This is the one for whose love you criticized me. I did try to seduce him, but he firmly refused. And if he doesn't do what I order him to, he will certainly be imprisoned and fully disgraced." That's the Quran. Is that in Genesis?
Nope.
By the way, that's after Joseph, the seduction scene with Joseph and Potiphar's wife. And guess who was declared innocent? Joseph. What does it say in the Midrash?
Let's summarize the Midrash because I want to keep us moving.
Yeah, anyway, it's all in the Midrash too. Okay, I'll just say that.
So we're seeing that the Quran is saying, okay, this is the story of Joseph, and it actually gives a very detailed account of it, but then it's including these stories, and we found a source that's very similar to these stories. Is that correct?
Yes.
Beautiful.
You know what's really just cool, real quick? Surah 1094, Muhammad is told, if you're in doubt about these stories that we've revealed to you, then ask those who have been reading the scriptures before you. So the Quran says, no, these stories we're telling you can verify them by going to the Bible. Ask the Jews and Christians who are reading it. They'll verify it. No, we won't. But that's what's funny. The Quran says it can verify its own stories by just going to us.
Obviously, the expectation is that they're all messed up when they're going to go, right? No,
not at all.
Exactly. I was sorry.
Let's move on to Alex here. So Alex, where do you think Islam comes from?
Yeah, just follow up with Greg's suggestion, and I'm gonna add a little bit more to it. And it's my by far favorite story from the Quran, Surah 12:67. He, Jacob, instructed them, his sons, "O my sons, don't enter the city all through one gate, but through separate gates." Anything similar in the Bible, in the Torah? You never heard it? I was for years thinking, like, where did they come from? Guess what? Same source. Let's go to Louis Ginsberg. And as he, Jacob, knew that they, his sons, were likely to attract attention on account of their heroic stature and handsome appearance, he cautioned them against going to the city all together through the same gate, or indeed showing themselves all together anywhere in public, that the evil eye be not cast upon them. So we have very interesting situation because Judaism and Islam is very superstitious.
That last part again, the evil eye will be cast upon them, that's the motive there?
Yeah, that was the reason, but Jacob said don't go through the same gate. So make sure nobody sees you because you're so beautiful compared to them, right?
That's fascinating. The evil eye is rampant in Islam.
And in Judaism too, by the way.
Fascinating. Okay, so we're going to do the fifth question. Describe the method of evangelism that you're using in your ministry and why. And we're going to start with Pastor Greg here.
Oh, okay. So our method, actually, we call the Master Key. It's a full step-by-step approach. It's a full system. So it's not just one argument. It's a series of arguments that build step by step. And essentially there are two phases or stages to our approach. The first is we have to deconstruct Islam. In fact, exactly like Michael said, got to deconstruct it first. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to us. So we deconstruct what we call the real 5 pillars of Islam. Okay, not what they call them, but what we call them. And those 5 pillars, I'm just going to read them to you. The issues that we deconstruct. I got it. Yeah, so the first is that the Torah is corrupted. We're going to address that. Secondly, that the Quran and the Torah have the same author, namely God. 3, that Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba. You already heard that one. 4th, that Ishmael is the father of the Meccan Arabs and Muhammad was an Ishmaelite. 5th, that Muhammad followed in the pattern of previous prophets and received his revelation in a similar way to Moses. So we deconstruct those 5 and then we reconstruct 5 pillars for the Bible using the Torah up to the New Testament. starting with original sin, then blood atonement as necessary, then theophanies in the Old Testament, then Isaiah 53, the suffering servant prophecy, and finally the gospel from the New Testament.
That's phenomenal. I love the Reconstruction approach as well because the Muslims must become Christian. Alex, describe the method of evangelism you're using in your ministry and why. Our ministry.
I second him. It's very easy. And by the way, everybody wants to learn it. And it's even like your kids know the Bible story, right? So it's quite easy. That's my input.
Okay, so let me kind of recoup what you just said because that was kind of a lot. So you're using the Old Testament stories, things that really every one of us have heard and have been discipled in, and you're using those stories to deconstruct some major theological claims in Islam. I'm hearing the fact that Abraham and Ishmael never went to the Kaaba, that Muhammad wasn't an Ishmaelite. You're saying that these stories can actually provide a ton of evidence against any of those pillars.
Yeah, and I think what I would emphasize is that we have one of our general principles we follow is that we're aiming to persuade Muslims, not persuade Christians. Okay? So you have to understand there's a difference. What is going to actually be persuasive to them is not necessarily what's going to be persuasive to you. And what's important to them is not necessarily what's important to you or me. So we often, typically as Christians, want to defend the things that are so important to us about Jesus and the Trinity and so forth. But what's important to them, what makes Islam Islam, actually is the things that we were just talking about. That it's an Abrahamic religion, that Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba. You know, if you think about what's really defines what's distinctive about Islam, it's the Kaaba. That's what they face every time they pray 5 times a day. Actually, their prayers really, it's better actually described as worship. It's a prescribed way of worshiping that's directed in the direction of the supposed temple that God supposedly told Abraham and Ishmael to build, and all of the rituals, which are ultimately really pagan in origin, they believe are from God. So if we dismantle those, then Islam falls.
Let's keep moving. Michael Jones, describe the method of evangelism that you're using in your ministry and why.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. Let's say you don't got a lot of time. I use a pincer move. Two simple arguments. First one, you attack the Quran. Remember, you got a notebook, write this down. You too. I see you got notebooks, you write this down. Surah 568. Ready for this? This is what the Quran says. O people of the book, you're people of the book according to the Quran, you have nothing to stand on unless you observe the Torah, the gospel, and what has been revealed to you from your Lord. Hold up. That sounds weird, I know, yeah, I heard you. Yeah, it does sound weird. Yeah, the Quran thinks that your scriptures are in line with it. As we saw, it isn't. So when I go to Muslims, like, look, that verse tells me if I want to follow the Quran, I got to believe in my scriptures. But my scriptures teach you guys preach a false religion. So why is your God so stupid? No, don't say that. Just be like, what's wrong with your God? Is there a problem? Ask a question. Don't say that, but you get the idea. Yeah, maybe he's sleeping, yeah. So use that, attack the Quran. The Quran is telling Jews and Christians to go to scriptures that contradict it. The other path, there was a poll put out. What bothers Muslims the most about their religion? The number one thing that bothered them was the moral problems of Muhammad. They are really bothered that the hadith say Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and he consummated the marriage when she was 9. Yes. Bring that up. It bothers them because there's something in every one of us. It's called the moral law. It tugs on our heart, and it's in Muslims as well. They're bothered by child marriage just as much as you are because they're also the image of God. So use that. Show them the moral problems of Muhammad. He said his followers can have sex slaves. He said they can have child brides. That's evil. Bring that stuff up. So do the pincer move. Attack the Quran.